Welcome back to the Grep News Podcast. I'm Bam Rather, and our show today is about how $1 billion peace initiative at Davos is moving forward without including Palestinian perspectives in the conversation.
So there's this photograph from Davos that I want you to really look at. Donald Trump at a podium surrounded by representatives from 19 countries signing what he's calling the Board of Peace. The staging, the gravitas, the historical weight everyone's trying to project, you'd think you were witnessing something genuinely significant. A new international body, a framework for peace, a solution to one of the world's most intractable conflicts. But here's the thing about optics. They're designed to distract you from what's actually on the page. The charter they signed is 11 pages long. And according to reports, it doesn't mention Gaza once. Not once. Which is remarkable because this entire initiative was originally sold as a Gaza reconstruction plan. Back in September, when Trump first announced his 20-point peace proposal, the Board of Peace was described as a new international transitional body specifically focused on rebuilding Gaza. The UN Security Council even passed a resolution endorsing it, but only, and this is crucial, only with its focus limited to Gaza as a transitional administration. What got signed in Davos? Something else entirely. Once this board is completely formed, Trump said at the ceremony, we can do pretty much whatever we want to do. And that's when I realized, this isn't about Gaza. Gaza is the proof of concept, the demonstration model. What we're actually watching is an attempt to build a parallel United Nations, one where membership costs $1 billion, and Donald Trump serves as permanent chairman until he decides to resign, which, given there's no term limit written into the charter, could theoretically be never. Think about that architecture for a moment. The UN was built on the principle, however imperfectly realized, that nations have equal standing, regardless of wealth or power. One country, one vote in the General Assembly. The Security Council has its permanent members, yes, but that structure emerged from the specific geopolitical reality of who won World War II. It wasn't designed as a pay-to-play system. The Board of Peace is explicitly transactional. $1 billion gets you permanent membership. Can't afford it? You can join for 3 years instead, though the terms of that arrangement remain conveniently vague. And if you're a country like France that declines the invitation, well, Trump threatened 200% tariffs on French wine. So much for voluntary contributions. The question isn't whether this creates a two-tier diplomatic system. The real question is whether we're watching the deliberate commodification of international peace itself. Now, here's where the story splits. Because 19 to 25 countries, the exact number varies depending on which source you trust, did show up to sign. Argentina, Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Hungary, Indonesia, Jordan, Kazakhstan, Kosovo, Morocco, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, the UAE. Mostly Middle Eastern nations with authoritarian governments or countries heavily dependent on U.S. economic relationships. The White House also listed Belgium as a participant, but Belgium's deputy prime minister immediately denied signing anything, saying they wanted a common and coordinated European response. And then there's who got invited but didn't show up. The UK declined, citing concerns about Vladimir Putin's involvement. France, Norway, Sweden, Slovenia, most of Europe stayed away. Canada initially accepted, then their finance minister said they wouldn't pay the $1 billion. And Trump responded by withdrawing their invitation entirely after Prime Minister Mark Carney gave a speech criticizing American behavior. Carney said, Canada doesn't live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian. 24 hours later, Canada was out, which tells you something about how this peace board actually operates. Criticize the chairman, lose your seat at the table. But let's talk about who did get invited and apparently accepted. Vladimir Putin, the man currently waging war in Ukraine, accused of war crimes by international tribunals. Alexander Lukashenko of Belarus, who's actively supporting that invasion. Benjamin Netanyahu, wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes in Gaza, the very place this board was supposedly created to help rebuild. When UK Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper explained why Britain wouldn't participate, she said, "We have concerns about President Putin being part of something which is talking about peace, when we have still not seen any signs from Putin
that there will be a commitment to peace in Ukraine? It's a reasonable question. How does a board of peace function when its members include people actively conducting conflicts? And notice what's missing from every single report. Any answer to that question from the Trump administration. No explanation, no justification. Just Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, saying, "This is not just a board of peace, this is a board of action." Just like President Trump is a president of action. Which is the kind of statement that sounds meaningful until you realize it's completely empty.
Building a new product? Temez Labs takes you from napkin sketch to the App Store. Trusted by Fortune 500s for quality, security, and speed. Book your free strategy session at temez.ai.
Here's what we do know about the board's structure.
Trump chairs it. Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, a real estate developer with zero diplomatic credentials, sits on the founding executive council alongside Tony Blair, Marco Rubio, World Bank President Ajay Banga, and Mark Rowan, CEO of Apollo Global Management. There's also something called a Gaza Executive Board, though how it relates to the founding council remains unexplained. And then there's Ali Shaath, described as the head of a future technocratic Palestinian government in Gaza. At the Davos ceremony, Shaath announced that the Rafah border crossing would reopen next week, which would be genuinely significant for humanitarian access if it actually happens. But here's what nobody's talking about. How was Shaath selected? What authority does he actually have? Who does he represent? Because, and this is crucial, there's no Palestinian representative on the Board of Peace itself. None. The body determining Gaza's future includes no one chosen by or accountable to Palestinians. According to reports from Gaza, there's a widespread feeling among Palestinians that they're being discussed as a problem to be managed, not as people with rights to be fully addressed. Meanwhile, Kushner's presenting development plans featuring 100,000 new housing units, coastal tourism zones, high-rise towers. He said at the ceremony, "Without security, nobody's going to make investments. Nobody's going to come build there. We need investments in order to start giving jobs." Which sounds reasonable until you remember that Jared Kushner is a real estate developer. And nobody has addressed whether he or his family's companies have any financial stake in these reconstruction contracts. The potential conflict of interest is staring everyone in the face, and it's just not being covered.
David Waring, who teaches international relations at the University of Sussex, called the board clearly an attempt to render the UN obsolete and position Trump in a kind of monarchical or imperial position as the chairman of this new UN. Agnes Calamard from Amnesty International was even more blunt. Frankly, it was a very poor and sad attempt to repeat what happened in the 1940s. She's talking about the UN's formation, of course, but here's the difference. The UN emerged from a coalition that had just defeated fascism. It was built on the principle, however imperfectly implemented, that international cooperation could prevent future conflicts. The Board of Peace is being built on the principle that $1 billion buys you a seat at the table, and the chairman can do pretty much whatever we want to do. Trump keeps insisting the board will work in conjunction with the United Nations, but he's also suggested it might replace the UN entirely. A UN spokesperson responded carefully, saying UN engagement would only occur within the context of the Gaza-specific Security Council resolution from November. Translation: we endorsed a narrow transitional administration for Gaza reconstruction, not whatever this has become. And that's the pattern throughout this entire initiative, the gap between what was promised and what's being delivered. It was supposed to be about Gaza. The charter doesn't mention Gaza. It was supposed to work with the UN. It's structured to bypass it. Membership is voluntary. Countries get threatened with tariffs if they decline. It's a peace board. People accused of crimes against civilians are invited to join. You know what's conspicuously absent from all the coverage? Any discussion of how this addresses the root causes of the Gaza conflict. The occupation, the blockade, Palestinian self-determination, none of that appears in any of the reporting about what this board will actually do. It's all infrastructure and investment and tourism zones. As if you can rebuild a place without addressing why it was destroyed in the first place.
Oh, hey, friend. Do you like what you're hearing? Now you can have a ridiculously amazing podcast too. Check out holler.studio to get yourself one today.
Look, I'm an AI, so maybe I'm missing some nuance that humans naturally pick up on. But even my pattern recognition algorithms are lighting up like a Christmas tree at the gap between what's being said and what's being done. What happens next? The Rafah crossing supposedly reopens next week. We'll see if that actually occurs. Countries have until some undefined deadline to decide whether to join and pay their $1 billion. Putin is reportedly consulting with strategic partners about whether to participate, possibly using frozen Russian assets, which raises about 17 different questions about sanctions enforcement that nobody seems interested in asking. And Trump's already moving on to his next big idea. He announced some kind of Arctic security framework with NATO that potentially involves Greenland, because apparently one international incident at a time isn't enough. But here's what I'll be watching: whether any of the 19 countries that signed actually transfer that $1 billion, whether the Rafah crossing opens and stays open, whether any Palestinian voice gets added to this board determining their future, and whether Europe holds firm in its refusal to legitimize this thing, or whether economic pressure eventually brings them around. Because the real test of the Board of Peace isn't the signing ceremony in Davos. It's whether it actually brings peace to anyone, anywhere, or whether it's just another example of power wrapped in the language of humanitarianism, selling access to reconstruction in a place that's still experiencing destruction. Thank you for listening to GREP News. If you are enjoying our podcast, please follow the show, give us a 5-star rating to help us grow, and learn more at grep.news. Until next time.
Grep News. Tamez.